There are plenty of games out there that technically run very well. They're not full of glitches, they're not buggy messes, they run at consistently 60 FPS. But despite all of that, the substance is extremely poor. They're horrible games. They're not fun to play. I've been talking about one for quite some time. You might have heard of it, Dragon Age: The Veilguard. Technically, it's fine from everything I've heard, but it doesn't really matter when it's simply not fun and it's horrible on every level. Then you've got games that are the complete opposite. Technically, they are messes. They're full of glitches. There's frustration due to them possibly at every turn. Under the surface, however, the game is actually a gem. Maybe it's the atmosphere that's incredible, perhaps the quests, the content that you're actually doing, the characters, the story, the mechanics, the gameplay. It's all really good, it's just bogged down by the technical issues. And I think it's pretty clear, despite not being able to explore it a whole heap yet myself, that Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl, which just released today as of a few hours of recording this, it's released, and it seems to be under the surface a very good game that's just bogged down by some of the technical issues. And I want to defend the game, despite some middling reviews that have gone out across the board, not just like mainstream sites, the IGNs and so on, who we know are corrupt, but there's also been sort of YouTuber reviews, independent people who said sometimes good things, but also a lot of poor things as well. But I want to defend the game because I don't want to see Stalker 2 unfairly thrown under the bus as like the next mess. Like this is the next disaster, like a Starfield or a Dragon Age: The Veilguard, because you may have noticed I've been critical of some games on this channel, but I want to make it really clear there's a reason I'm critical of some of those games and why I would not be with something like Stalker 2. And I will say as well that I'm not excusing poor quality releases, but I do think there's a bit of a spectrum. For instance, some games can release as a technical mess, and it might be because the publisher was greedy and wanted the game out early before it was actually ready. It may also be that the devs are trying to deliver something that's actually innovative, and they actually want to take risks, not just release something safe. And sometimes they might bite off more than they can chew, and that results in the game not performing technically all that well. So there's a lot of different good faith reasons for why a game might perform poorly, but sometimes it is the developer is just lazy, or the publisher doesn't give a shit, given the amount of lazy PC ports that we've gotten over the years that are pathetic and I don't want to support. But I still feel sometimes when a game releases in a poor technical state, I still often kind of want to support it. And I'll list some examples. So Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, for instance. That released in a horrible, almost unplayable state, probably much worse than Stalker 2. But it is a gem of a game, and unfortunately the developer couldn't really fix it themselves. They got shut down, they ran out of money. But it's been fixed by fans over the years because it was so great. You can look at Cyberpunk for a more recent example. Like, that comes out, it got a very poor critical reception, but a lot of people knew, and I felt this. I had a pretty good time when it came out, though it was probably because I was playing on PC, not one of the scam Xbox One or PS4 versions, which really were a rip-off. Like, they shouldn't have released on those consoles. But I was having fun because I knew that the core content was good. The quest lines, the story, some of the gameplay, the world. It was a great foundation. It just needed more time in the oven, basically. So that distinction's got to be there, that when you've got something like a Stalker 2, it's got a 74 on Metacritic, which is lower than the Veilguard. It's getting some reviews like this, where it's like 4 out of 10. But all these reviews are pretty much saying the same thing. That the game itself, under the surface, is great. It's a fantastic game that is trying to take some risks in some areas. Kind of old school, it's got an old school influence. It didn't try and sort of run away from the original game's Shadow of Chernobyl, which I really enjoyed. And I will say I'm not like some big Stalker fanatic where I was obsessed with this game being good and now I'm totally biased and I can't think objectively because I was so excited. Not really, I just was sort of looking forward to this as maybe another good sort of open world post-apocalyptic kind of game. which I think it is, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun once they fix a lot of these issues. But just looking through like these negative reviews, mixed reviews that have been put out there, I just hate for it to get thrown in like the Starfield pile, where it's like, this is a game people were waiting for, and it's clearly crap. Look at what critics are saying, or some people online are saying, like Skill Up, for instance, who did put out a review saying, right now I cannot recommend Stalker 2. And I mean, that's probably fair, given some of those technical issues, but for people who might not watch all of these reviews and really get into the substance, I think it's really important to note that difference. Like, why are people not recommending it? But why is that different to something like a Starfield, for instance? Because I think what some people miss with Starfield, especially fans of Starfield, who tried to defend it and so on, is there was always this talk of, oh no, once the developers spend a bit more time on it, they'll fix it, like Cyberpunk, for instance, or like No Man's Sky. But Starfield could never be saved, like the Veilguard can never be saved no matter how much work gets done to it. Because when a game has a bad foundation, meaning the content is bad, the overall gameplay loop pretty much sucks, there's not a lot you can do there. Like, no modder's going to be able to fix that without basically making a brand new game from scratch. At that point, like, what are you doing? What is the point? With something like Stalker 2, it's the opposite. They've made a labor of love, it sounds like. They've done what I think was unexpected. I didn't think that this game was going to be all that good. I thought it was going to be probably modernized, lose a lot of what made the original special. Doesn't seem like that's the case. It simply seems like they maybe bit off more than they could chew. It's a very long game, I'm hearing. 50, 100 hours, which is a lot for what is basically an open world first-person shooter with some RPG elements. Usually games like that aren't all that long. They've clearly been ambitious, and it's just released maybe too early. They needed more time on it. So I think that they are going to fix it, and this game probably will. I don't want to speak too soon, given I haven't played through all of it, but it's probably going to end up being a great game. One of the better games that was actually released this year. And just a few things on that. Again, I thought this game was going to be crap, because if we look here on Wikipedia, GSC Game World is the developer, and they made all of the Stalker games. So you go back to 2007, when Shadow of Chernobyl came out. There was a couple of more of the same kind of sequels in Clear Sky, Call of Pripyat, all released sort of late 2000s. And then there was nothing until 2024, Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl comes out. The reason for that big gap in games is because most of the people who made the original Stalker, they moved on to the Metro series of games. That's why they kind of have a similar tone and vibe about them. So most of the people who worked on Stalker 2 did not work on the original games. So I was very skeptical. That barely ever works out, where new people make a follow-up to a beloved franchise, and they don't totally screw it up. It feels like a cash grab. So that's another reason I'm very surprised that the content in this game seems to be pretty high quality. And hey, the originals were known to be very glitchy, but were eventually fixed. Now, it's not to say that there's no genuine criticisms about the game, and it's purely short-term stuff like technical issues that will be fixed. There are some criticisms to be made. I'll get to them towards the end, but I just want to point that out, that it's surprising how high quality this is to some extent. And I am hearing that some of the talk of technical issues is maybe a little overblown. Some people are playing it. Maybe they're on high-spec computers, but it seems to be running okay. It's not like everyone's having massive problems ever. I want to just read some of this review, because again, the mainstream ones, you got to take so many of them with a grain of salt, and most of these people who are reviewing it, they haven't played a Stalker game ever, given they came out so long ago. And while I've said I'm not a hardcore Stalker person, I've played that first one quite a few times. It's very fun. It sounds like this tries to be a faithful throwback. It doesn't try and sort of throw all the things out and modernize. It's absolutely in good spirit. This review really sums things up, I think. This person says, I've played through most of the game now. First off, this thing is much bigger than previous titles. I'm over 50 hours in, I've skipped stuff, and the devs estimate 100 plus hours for a full playthrough. It doesn't sound like the devs are lying or exaggerating, which they often do. It's a big game. It's an ambitious game. It is, of course, buggy, but so were the previous titles. The AI this is probably going to be one of the more fair, good faith criticisms, that the AI is not what was promised, maybe. The AI of the enemies isn't that good. We'll come to that. But I thought this part was interesting, where this person says, I'll just go ahead and say I'm overall enjoying this. It has a weak start, but gradually gets more and more immersive and interesting and feels like a natural evolution of the old titles. That's something that often exposes the mainstream reviewers who don't play a game past like 2 or 3 hours, because they don't even like gaming. Like, they're just getting their reviews over and done with so they can get back to political punditry. Basically, that's what the IGNs, the Eurogamer writers actually care about. Anytime you've got to play a little bit to actually get into the content and have a good time, they're never going to get there. Similar but bigger and better at just about everything. The open world is very large, but handmade from top to toe, top to bottom. No procedural crap here. It's also challenging, doesn't hold your hand. Combat is lethal, and when both mutants and stalkers, bandits, whatever, get involved, it gets frantic and very, very fun. So a lot of the fans, this extends to Steam as well. Like, it's got very positive reviews right now. The player numbers are really, really good for a game like this, which I thought would maybe have had a culty kind of following, but the Stalker series is actually bigger than I gave it credit for. Like, it's blown the Dragon Age, the Veilguard numbers out of the water, and I would have assumed that Dragon Age was actually a bigger name. Apparently not, despite some of these reviews. Apparently not. It's already done 100k plus players, which beats the Veilguard. And it also puts to bed that bullshit narrative that was going around, that the Veilguard was the most pre-ordered game on Steam. There were a lot of people saying that. But Heart of Chernobyl was literally there the whole time on Steam, waiting to be pre-ordered. Now, it wasn't showing up sort of highest in the charts. However, people were quietly pre-ordering it over the last sort of 12, 18 months, however long it was actually available for sale. They didn't just buy it all at once, like the Veilguard, given that game was only up for pre-order for a little bit of time. So way more people were interested in Heart of Chernobyl. People don't really care what the critics are saying. They've looked at the game, they've listened to actual players, instead of the mainstream critics who are saying, yes, there's some problems, but there's a good game here. And over time, it will improve, which isn't going to happen to the Veilguard, because you've seen it. The story, the voice acting work, everything in it. Like, that game can't really get any worse, but it can't get any better either. There's no saving that. The foundation was built on sand. It's garbage. Starfield, the exact same thing. No modders are going to fix it, despite what people said for months and months. Oh, just wait for the creation kit and it will be saved. No, some stormtrooper outfit that someone makes isn't going to fix the issues with Starfield, which was ruined at conception. Before any lines of code were compiled, put together for that game, the game was over. It was dead because they made the decision to have procedural generation as the focus, too many planets instead of handcrafted exploration. Ironic, because Stalker 2, that fan who was reviewing the game, did mention that a great thing about it is that the open world, very large, handmade content with actual love put into it, not procedural crap everywhere. Now, procedural generation, there's a place for it. It can be good. I don't think it's usually the case that in open worlds where exploration is the focus, it's a good thing. So I'm glad the devs focused on quality instead of quantity, and yet it's still a big meaty game from the sounds of it. So they've done a lot of good things. I've heard that the choices in the game, they really matter as well. Some of those RPG elements are actually very well done. So I think it could be sort of a sleeper for one of the better games released this year, once all is said and done. Like, again, Cyberpunk, once some time was spent on it, I think it's looked at very, very fondly now. Now, I do want to mention that there are some genuine criticisms of the game outside of the technical stuff. The biggest one is the AI. So, for a while, the developers were promoting this A-Life 2.0 system, and this comes from the original games. People have a memory of, there's very advanced AI in the Stalker series, where enemies don't just sort of spawn around you and you kill them and then that's it. Like, it's a living, breathing world where you can be on one side of the map all the way to the east killing things, but on the complete opposite side of the map, maybe bandits and mutants are having some sort of shootout. and everything goes crazy, and most of them die, and the bodies are all there. And then if you wander over there 3 hours later, you'll see the aftermath of that shootout. And it's like little stories, little events are playing out around the world, and you sort of just feel like a small part of this overall bigger world that you're exploring and you're in. It feels less gamey. There's a bit more to it than that, but that's kind of the gist of it. So people are expecting with Stalker 2 to have an even bigger, more reactive version of that was going to do so much more, given this is a newer game. I guess what I'll say is, from doing a little bit of research on that, it seems like some people have taken the Stalker modded experience that they've had in like 2024 after 15 plus years worth of mods where AI has been improved by the community, and so people just see that as like the base Stalker experience. It's kind of like thinking that Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, your memories of how it is now, not back in 2004 when it was a total mess before fans fixed it. So some people just have to keep that in mind, that Stalker didn't always have really expansive, interesting AI at release. I mean, I've played it just base Shadow of Chernobyl, the first Stalker, a number of times, and I don't remember the AI, all this interesting stuff happening. Maybe I'm forgetting, but I don't remember it being that expansive. I personally think, in terms of just enemies coming at you, the Fear from 2005 AI was the best. I haven't played a game, I think, a shooter that had AI as good as that. But that aside, the devs did advertise this. This is an article from a few years ago, where they mention the previous Stalker games introduced a living world simulating system. The reimagined version of this system, which we call A-Life 2.0, will control the state of the world and the behavior of characters and mutants, making the zone ever-changing and truly alive. It's kind of like when in a game an NPC has like a path that they follow, like they go about their day, they don't just stand there, but they actually bring that into the gameplay, where they're going out into the world fighting people, and mobs are fighting each other, and so apparently none of that's really there in Stalker 2 as of right now. Like, enemies just spawn next to you if you leave a place, and then you come back 2 minutes later, a whole plethora of enemies have spawned there, and it just feels sort of gamey. Like, it doesn't feel like that living, breathing world. So some people are criticizing that, which is fair. My view is, and I mean, developers, publishers, they lie all the time about things, but I don't think this developer lied about this feature. I think they tried to develop it, and they were probably having a lot of the technical issues that the game's released with, but it was probably even worse. And at some point, they either had to cut the feature, which would be a big shame, or they had to postpone it. That's what I'm hoping, because apparently the Steam description was advertising this feature since or until I think until yesterday or something. So really, really late, they removed the feature from the description, which would be scummy if it has been completely scrapped. I have a feeling that late in the game they had to make a call, because if you think about the technical issues, if there's fights breaking out all over the world, I could see that bogging down the game, leading to much lower FPS and so on. So hopefully they've just shelved it, and they plan to bring it back in a future patch once they get some of these technical issues under control. That would be the best thing, but that may not be the case. If we think pessimistically, maybe they scrapped it and they just never took it off the marketing page because it sounded good and they knew it would lead to bad discussion, negative discussion about the game. So we'll see. But I really just wanted to make that point clear, that you get these games and there's negative reception to them, but the context is really important, because some games are just bad and they cannot be saved. I really don't think Stalker 2 is one of them. The reviews might be mixed to negative in some cases, but I think the fan base, the players, can see that under all of that, there is a really, really fun game here that may end up being one of the best games of the year. And if you buy it now to support it, I think in some cases that's a good thing, because these games that have technical issues, if they don't sell at all and people only buy them in a year's time once they're fixed and people are sort of paying 10, 15 bucks for a copy, we probably never get another one. On the other hand, no developer just deserves your money for the sake of it. If they've released a technical mess of the game, even if there's a lot of fun to be had, if you're missing out on fun because you have to keep reloading due to glitches and you're working through issues and so on, that doesn't feel good. And it never feels good to pay full price to support a developer knowing that people who wait are going to have the better experience. But it is a dilemma, because I like to see games that maybe are a bit more old school and they're trying to be ambitious. I like to see them do well, more so than, again, Veilguard. No technical issues as of what I've heard, but the actual game sucks. So hopefully the game ends up doing well. It seems to have done really well already, which is great. And I really hope they fix it. I hope in 6 months, 12 months' time, people look back at this as being yet another one of these great games that have come out that don't focus on the wrong things. They stick to their roots, old school influence, no bullshit, none of the Dragon Age, the Veilguard pandering or whatever. Just a fun game. So I wanted to defend Stalker 2 despite some of the issues, and hopefully I have fun with it. Thanks for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.